Hello everyone, DM Gashbad here. We're doing something a little bit different today. A couple of months ago, we finished up a campaign, an escalation Warhammer Fantasy campaign. We started off at a real low points value, I want to say like 400 points, and I was using a Vampire Count's army, which I had not really used before. I had a couple of things painted. I had some of these skeletons, I had a bunch of these ghouls, I had the direwolves. I may have had the corpse cart. But anyway, the rest of it would have been painted in the course of this 9-month or so campaign. And I said when I finished it that I wanted to do a little review of the painting, of the modeling, and how the units worked in the game. And we're finally to that point. I wanted to finish up a couple of things, but we're there now. I finally finished up painting the last model I wanted done for this review, and so we're going to go through these guys. Let's start with the characters first, and we're going to start with the model that I painted last. So we're going kind of in an opposite order here. Now, at the very end of the final battle, I did want to introduce a vampire to the campaign. But like I said, I'm a slow painter, and it took me a while, but I finally got him done. This is my vampire, just a hero-level vampire with light armor and an additional hand weapon. You can see he's got his little raven on his arm that he's talking to. That's Eric Draven. So he's based on the old Vespero Vendetta model, but he looks really vampiric, that guy. So I painted him just kind of straight. I didn't really change anything about him except for adding the little bird from an old Tombstone sprue. I haven't used him in a game yet, but I really wanted him, so I assume he's good. I've fought against these guys at small points values before. Oops, sorry about my finger there. Yeah, they're good. Primarily, though, I wanted him to finish up my Mordheim gang, and I'll get into that in a little bit. Moving on, here's a Necromancer. The Necromancer is good. He's relatively cheap, a level 2 for 100 points. I gave him the Ruby Ring of Ruin for most of the rounds of the campaign. His name is Ethrak Crowfather. You can see, again, he's got a little raven there that he's petting. This is a combination of the old, I guess it's called what, Arcanum something or other. It's the old Empire Wizards sprue. So it's a combination of him and the Corpse Master bits from the Corpse Cart. So he originally was holding like a little crystal ball. I should go over the theme of the army. So anyway, this is an army that's supposed to be the servants of death directly. So they're all kind of things that, you know, you might see serving the death itself be metaphors for death, or serving the gods of death, or things that are not necessarily monsters, but they're just they're aspects of death that have come back into the regular world. They're kind of orderly in that way. So the idea with this vampire here is he's of course based on the Raven, you know, the Crow, the Raven. That's a Vincent Price movie based on an Edgar Allan Poe poem. No, this is based on the Crow, the Brandon Lee movie, who comes back to avenge his killing and the death of his wife. He's got his little raven there. So I thought that was fitting with the theme, and I thought that model looked reasonably well. You can see I tried to paint a little of that goofy face paint that he's got on the skull mask, and I think I got a part of it. I think it came out okay. The purple guy, I wanted him to look like an amethyst wizard, so those are gods of the sort of death magic. Maybe that has gone a little bit too far in serving that particular wind of magic. And then for the last hero, we have Mr. Grimm, who is just a straight wraith. I think I actually lost the original scythe top, so I just used one from the zombie sprue. But otherwise, he is absolutely just a regular wraith model. No conversions or anything like that required. I included him in the army because he was easy to paint and he took up a lot of points, because I'm a slow painter and I had trouble keeping up with adding like about 100 points every round. So I wouldn't normally want to put an ethereal model into a small army list because they're hard to deal with for troops that don't have magic items or a lot of spells, which of course the armies at small points values don't. But really, he was not a major influence in the campaign. He was nice to have. He's pretty fast. He could lurk in a unit and then zip out when he needed to redirect something, or, you know, add a little punch in hand-to-hand combat, and it's kind of reliable. But he did die a fair amount. just combat res to death, just shot off with magic spells. And of course, the 2 attacks at strength 5, it's not much. He really didn't contribute an enormous amount to the campaign, so I don't feel too bad about including him. So those are my 3 characters. Oh, about the wizard, I will say, at the very end of the campaign, I realized there was the Master of the Dead upgrade that you can get for the Necromancer. And that allows you to increase zombies past their starting size. Now, I should have taken that from like as soon as humanly possible. Maybe not before the Ruby Ring of Ruin, because having that extra blasty spell was really handy. But as soon as, what would it be, about 600 points? So as soon as I could take a 150 point model, I think you really want that Master of the Dead increase, because there were a lot of times in the early rounds where he just wasn't doing a whole lot. The troops weren't in combat, there was no one to heal up, and if I could just throw that spell around and, you know, increase the size of some of my infantry units, then that would be really handy. Oh, so let's go on to infantry units. Here are the Doomed Hunters. Those are the old Cursed Company Dogs of War models. I got them because I thought a Dogs of War skeleton unit in my Orc and Goblin army would be really cool, so I bought up as many of the Orcs as I could. Here we have, now I don't have the musician, so I can't actually feel them as the actual Dogs of War unit right now. But we have a bunch of skeletons from my Vampire Counts army, and that's what they are. So the idea behind that is that there's this guy, and he's been cursed, and he hates Vampire Counts and Kemrian undead, and he really wants to work against them. So he's on a quest for vengeance to take revenge on undead. And that's, you know, I mean, granted, I've got an undead army, but people back from the dead on a righteous quest of vengeance, it seems to fit right in. So that's what I wanted for my skeletons. Now, these are single pose, these orcs, so I tried to mix them up as much as possible. Probably the most elaborate conversion that I did was taking their arm, just cutting it off at the bone and just pivoting it down. So instead of having their arm up, their arm is down. And I replaced their standard shields with orc shields. Most of these other guys, this actually isn't the Richter Kruger model. I just used a regular undead champion, a white of some kind. And I did some weapon swaps, so I gave one guy an axe, a cleaver from the really old plastic orcs. And I bent a couple of them around a little bit. So I just tried to mix it up. Oh, I did try and give one guy a helmet. This guy's got an axe in the head. Just sawed a big chunk out of his skull, stuck an axe in it. And where's the helmet guy? I wasn't too happy with that. The helmet sits too high up on his head. I should have sunk that down a little bit. But what can you do? Anyway, that's that unit there. I liked them in game. They are not a bad little bunker. I'm not sure. So, I mean, a big question is when you're taking your standard core stuff, what do you take? Your basic choices are between zombies, skeletons, and ghouls. The skeletons are kind of the in-between path. They're not as bad in combat as zombies, but they're also not as cheap. And then the opposite is true when comparing them to the ghouls. But they are fairly cheap. They've got an armor save. They're not, you know, they're not terrible. I don't lose that unit very often. Granted, they are strictly a bunker. They are not to get into hand-to-hand combat if I can at all help it. But they don't die real fast. And again, these are small point value games. And if they get into trouble, the Necromancer can always bail out of the unit, and these guys can redirect or be a speed bump or something like that. So I did like their performance. Would a big unit of ghouls be better? In some circumstances, yes. In some circumstances, no. I don't think I was handicapping myself by taking skeletons instead of zombies. Let's move on to the ghouls. Now, part of the thing with these skeletons is I have a real hard time highlighting ivory. It just takes a really long time. The paints I use are kind of thin in the yellow and brown range. But these guys are the Dwellers Beyond. And the idea is they're like the shadow ghosts that come to claim souls at the ends of movies like Ghost. In fact, also, if you remember the underrated Disney animated movie Princess and the Frog, I actually made this guy like Dr. Facilier, the voodoo guy who got taken away. So he's a standard metal ghoul that I made a little skull walking stick for and a little hat, little voodoo style top hat. just shaved off a little skull from somewhere else, and the rest is just green stuff. It's just a cylinder cut off at both ends and a little flattened ball to make the thing. And I think that actually turned out pretty well. You bend around these hands enough and you can get the position that you want. But the big thing, and you can see I actually highlighted the black on the hat because it's a real hat. The rest of them are just shadows. So real straightforward. You just paint them all black. You go and you paint the eyes white and the grass green, and if they're holding a skull or a bone or something, you can paint that. But man, I could actually churn these guys out really quick, and that's their primary advantage. They are not bad in game. They take wounds reasonably easily, and they don't always put out a lot of damage, but I didn't lose that unit a lot either. The opponents kind of wanted to avoid these big infantry units, which makes me think I should include more of them. So they, I often had trouble healing them up. When the opponents got them down, they didn't want those invocation of the hex to heal these guys back up. So that didn't always happen, but they are, again, I don't think you handicap yourself by taking big blocks of ghouls. This is a mostly core kind of army, really, and they perform pretty well. Granted, it's against other mostly core armies, but yeah, I was very happy with the ghouls and how they did. Let's talk about the scenic base here in the middle. So again, these are little shadow guys that crawl out from some other dimension to claim the souls of the people whose time it is. So I actually took my Dremel and I drilled out the center section of this base. I stuck a little bit of plastic card on the bottom just to give it a little depth. Painted that all black, puttied in a little ground material, make it a little bit of pit, and then chopped off legs and hands and things like that to make it look like they're actually climbing out. These are the kinds of scenic bases in the middle of units that I like. I like the ones that actually show how many guys there should be. There are actually 9. Granted, one's just a hand coming out of the very center there. But, you know, it's 9 guys. It doesn't look so weird to have them on the base because this thing can just appear anywhere. So it's not like it's a big statue or some obvious piece of terrain that they're dragging along. It's just a little summoning pit that kind of travels around the battlefield and swarms out these little 2-attack poison monsters. And so, yeah, I just wanted to show off that a little bit. Let's go into the zombies. Now, I did not play with zombies enough in this campaign for my taste. The main reason is painting these guys, for whatever reason, took so long. I know I said the skeletons took a long time. The ghouls took no time whatsoever. But for whatever reason, even compared to normal humans, just the zombies just take forever. And largely it's because they've got all these little different bits. Let's try and focus here, iPhone. So they've got, I put the little yellow eyes in the guys, and they got different things of clothing, and they've got their shoes. And of course, the basing method that I've used for all this takes a little bit more time. But anyway, there's just a lot more colors on these guys, a lot more careful pieces, bits of bone, bits of flesh, all that stuff. So just took me forever, and I never actually did finish them for the campaign. I had to go back and finish them up later. That's kind of what I was waiting on to do this review. So these are the Revenants. They are all men that have been betrayed and are coming back from the dead to take their vengeance. And so part of the reason that these guys took so long is I kind of made them all unique. I converted them all to look like they were killed by someone else and they're out to get them. So this guy has a knife in his gut. He's about to draw it out to take revenge on somebody. So let me just go through a couple of these guys. So here's a pirate. He had a cannonball chained to his leg, all Pirates of the Caribbean style, and he was sent to the bottom, so he's, I guess, mad about that. Here is my standard bearer. So these are paper standards that I paint freehand, just normal typing paper. The idea was there's a hand coming in front of like a moon-like eye in the background, because they all had yellow eyes, because that's what I feel Revenants have. It looked a little, am I super happy with this one banner? It's the one banner I have in my army, and I think it's okay. I think the eye turned out looking a little bit too much like a lemon for my taste. But anyway, he's got an arrow stuck in the back of his head. It's actually coming out of his eye socket on the other side. What else have we got? There's a guy. Someone planted an axe in the back of his head. Just stuff that happens in the Warhammer world. So most of these are fairly simple conversions. Here's a guy. someone poisoned his beer stein. So we kind of got a frat party guy, a little purple drool coming out of his mouth and coming out of the stein. So that guy didn't have a great party. I think he kind of looks like he's dressed like Fred from Scooby-Doo. Who else we got? Took some arrows from Night Goblin Sprue. This guy got some arrows in the back. 3 of them. He must have done something. Must have done something to make someone mad. This guy, knife in the back, pretty straightforward. Again, from a little dagger from the Night Goblin Sprue. This guy, gave him a bottle. Again, got poisoned. A little green. I was experimenting with a lot of zombie flesh colors, and I didn't find anything that I absolutely loved. I think maybe things that are actually more flesh-like. I like the grays and the actual kind of flesh colors probably best. The browns and the greens, I don't know. I haven't got a great sense of that. So this is a zombie that on the sprue, he's actually hung. It's like a guy hanging from a noose. So I kind of, let's see, focus there. Focus. I'm focusing on my thumb pretty well. There we go. So he's got a little rope attached to the neck. Someone came behind him and throttled him. You know, feel bad for this guy. So again, just a dude with a knife, guy with an arrow. What do we got? So you can do little stories with these guys, which is nice. Here's a guy in the uniform of like Empire soldiery. I kind of put a bullet hole in his head, blew out his eye. Poor guy. You know, too bad for him. Let's see. So another guy, another Empire guy got executed, shot in the back. This guy, again, stabbed in the stomach. No one's ever going to see these when playing the game, so I'm taking the time to point them out now. Oh, this was one of my first guys. What's with him? Oh, his throat slit. Yeah, just took a chunk out of his neck and did a little, you know, had a little barber accident. Not an accident, because he's out for revenge. Axe in the back. Okay, and then we get into some weirder ones. Once you do the normal kind of murders, you start thinking of different ways. I think that guy's got his throat slit as well. And so the weirder ones here. This guy got an exploding box. Shows up. There's a box on his front doorstep. It blew up. So I made a little box out of like an old chest piece, carved it away, and then just painted everything black. Just dry brushed it all black and gray, like he got blown up. Picking up his package from Jokey Smurf. And then this guy, he really stands out, unfortunately, in the unit. Got a pillow shoved in his face. Tried to make it like he's in some kind of nightgown. So I took the top off of a night goblin, the cloak part, and made him a little nightcap. And then I sculpted a giant pillow out of green stuff and just stuck it on his face. Painted him blue, so someone came by and just suffocated him in the night. I think he's funny. I think he's hilarious, but he's just this glob of white, like Stay Puft Marshmallow Man in the middle of the unit. I maybe wish that he blended in a little bit better. Anyway, I love zombies. I love raising them. I love using them. They're kind of just dopes that are there to get in the way of the opponent's army. I think they're super useful. I'd love to have just piles of them. They're no good at all at actually inflicting wounds. Any wound you inflict is like cause for celebration. And hooray, you know, a zombie actually did something. You feel great for him. But other than that, I don't know. I really like them. Zombies should get used all the time. Summon them, bring them with you. I don't know. Let's go on to the last core unit. Here are the dire wolves. Dire wolves, again, super easy to paint. They're basically one color. So you just go, you dry brush them all, your black or your gray or whatever you like, and then you just pick out a couple of things. What color did I make these guys' eyes? Looks like just black. Just a tiny bit of white. So I made their eyes white. So these are the grim omens. Lots of stories in folklore about black dogs showing up and that being a sign of death or a baleful omen or something like that. Special point out to Cerebus here in the middle. This is my, what do you call it? The champion of the dire wolves. So the guardian of Hades in Greek mythology is Cerberus. So I went and made and it's a 3-headed dog. So I went and made a 3-headed dire wolf. Doom wolf, that's what the champions are called. So I just had some extra heads lying around from some other models. This one's from a Chaos Hound. You can make a 2-headed Chaos Hound, so you just get an extra head. Just stuck that on the side. And I think this is the original head. And there's one from, I don't even know. It kind of looks like a Gazak Khan wolf. It doesn't matter. Anyway, you just glommed on a couple extra wolf heads, covered up the fur with green stuff, which is super easy to do, and you're off and running. So, but in game, they're not great. I dropped them as soon as I could because direwolves in game have a lot of problems. They got no armor. They take wounds really, really easily. You can't get command or any serious upgrades besides the Doomwolf itself. They are okay on the charge as far as offense goes. You get a single strength 4 attack. Otherwise, they're not much to write about. So they're not great in defense. They're not great in offense. Their speed is good, kind of. They can't march if they're away from the general. And you want them away from the general because that's where you want your fast stuff. You want them ranging out to try and, I don't know, find a soft target, one soft enough that they can actually fight. And it's not easy. They lost against a lot of stuff. Goblin Wolf Riders, that kind of thing. Even charging against a War Machine crew. It's not 100% you're going to win that fight. They're, flanking some things. You're probably going to give up as much combat resolution as you gain. And as far as redirectors go, they're not fast cav, so they don't have the movement abilities to get in exactly the position that you want a lot of the time. And sometimes you don't have the movement to do it. Sometimes you're only trucking around at your 9 inches because you can't march for whatever reason. So these guys, I just wasn't able to use them very well. It's nice that I had them painted. If you're just starting off a Vampire Count's army, paint a bunch of those, you get your core units out of the way, they come in really fast, and then as soon as possible, replace them with Fellbats. Anyway, I just couldn't get these guys to do much that was useful in any of my games. Oh, I did have one little core thing, just some extra zombies. These might have been like the second batch of models that I ever painted. I did rebase them to match the new stuff. Anyway, they're super, super old. I'd love to have a unit of those guys. But for right now, they're just extras to fill out numbers in the Revenants or as things that I might summon or something like that. But just thought I'd show those with the rest of them. Let's go on to special units. Here we have the Bat Swarms. There's not much to say about those guys. They're fine, I guess. I only used them in the very last battle. The thing is, I painted a bunch of these guys when I was painting my Warhammer Quest stuff. So let's see, they're support units. They're okay at that. But here's the deal. So in Warhammer Quest, you just have individual bats. They show up and you find them in the little tiles. And in these, you have bases of them. So what I did was I took my square bases and I put down, well, I didn't have any metal sheet at the time, so I just used like these little washers. And then I took little sections of magnet and I puttied up a little material on there, stuck the bats on. And so when I want to play Warhammer Quest, I have these individual stands of bats. And when I want to play Warhammer, I go and stick them on the tray, or on the bases, and they can go cruising around this way. Not only that, but there's 5 on each base. Each base has 5 wounds. So when I take a wound, I just take off one of these guys. Oh, it takes 1 wound. Oh, it took 3 wounds. There's a thing. And when all is said and done, you're just left with a base with 1 wound. Now, I did go and do some conversion work on the main bases. So this guy got a little bat swooping past a little bit of a fence. I try and change it up a little bit because, again, the ones from the Warhammer Quest box, they're all the same. So the more you can change those up, the better. They are mixed in with the metal bats that they used to sell, the actual metal bat swarms. So let's see. So same thing over here. We got the one on the base is swooping past a gravestone, and then this one's more of just a standard one, just a guy in the middle. I cut down some of the poles, give them a little bit of different heights on the bases, and I think they look okay. In game, like I said, I haven't used them very much. They seem fine, kind of expensive. You got a lot of stuff to just hold up the enemy and divert. I don't think that you really need bat swarms in your list. There's a lot of stuff that fills that role. But again, if you don't want to use fell bats for whatever reason, crazy reason, but if you don't, or dire wolves or whatever, these guys can work. Oh, and here we have the Stone Guardians. So these are the Crypt Horrors. The Crypt Horrors are phenomenal, just in-game. I knew this going into it. I knew that I had fought against Crypt Horrors and they're a giant pain to deal with. They are just so resilient. They are like toughness 5 with 5 up regen, 3 wounds each, monstrous infantry, and you can heal them. Now, I made a mistake in the campaign. I thought, I read the rules for the Invocation of Nehek, and it said, you heal D3 plus caster level for infantry. Yeah, I forgot. It's just regular infantry. It's not monstrous infantry. So in a lot of the games, I healed these guys more than I should have. But even so, they've got 3 strength 4 attacks with poison attacks. They are really good. So I wanted these guys to look like the stone guardians that you have outside of crypts. Some cultures, they have these little statues and their job is to watch after the burial areas and protect the people that are buried in there. So I painted them all gray. I tried to take off as many of those pierced bone things that they got stuck inside of them. Same thing with the ghouls over here. As many of the little bones and skulls as they have hanging off their arms or backs or whatever, I tried to shave those away. And then I went to the old Mordheim architecture sprue, and I took out the gargoyle heads, and I puttied them on to make their heads. So the idea is they look like these stone monsters that are animated to help my force out do the work of the gods of death. And it turned out okay. I'm not super happy with how these heads are. Maybe I should have just planted these gargoyle things directly onto the bodies, because I feel like the way that I did it, so the shape of them, I tried to continue the shape of the head back through the rest of it, because otherwise they're just these flat pieces. Like this guy looks okay, the shape here. But the other ones, the ones with the more jagged edges, I don't know, I think they kind of look like those peanut butter cups. So I'll probably try something different. Reaper Miniatures makes just an awesome guy, like almost exactly like this, like some kind of golem made of cemetery bits. I like wrought iron gate wings and all that kind of stuff. And I'm kind of a purist as far as Citadel miniatures go. I try to use just the Games Workshop stuff, but I have to admit it's exactly what I was trying to go for. Anyway, they're fantastic in game. They're a great bargain. Way too cheap, way too good for what their points are. And so no reason not to include them unless you're trying to go for a particular theme or make for a better game. Fellbats, same thing. Fellbats do absolutely everything that direwolves do, only a million times better. They are not particularly great in combat. They take wounds relatively quickly, only toughness 3 with I think 2 wounds. But they are just the world's best diverters. You can keep them hidden, then fly them up in front of whatever unit you don't want to charge you, and then, they just die and you can go from there. They're just amazing at it. So just really tactical models. These guys, again, I realized a little bit before one round of the campaign, it's like, I need a bunch of points and I haven't been keeping up with my painting. The zombies are going too slow. What can I paint really fast to fill out my army? It is these Fellbats. So I just painted the Fellbats really quick. They don't completely fit in with the theme. I call them Bunny and Kindling because that's referencing an old D&D game that I was playing in. And 2 of the characters turned into werebats. They got infected with lycanthropy. And at the time, there's a big fight between the undead and the lycanthropes. And so maybe you can kind of sort of work it in. It's like these are werebats and they're helping out the undead in this quest for vengeance or whatever. But it's thin. Really, I just needed the points to fill out, and the Fellbats were the thing, and so I tried to excuse them. Giant Ravens would be better for the army. One thing to note, these are just the ones that I had, and so they rank up really, really poorly. They're exactly the same height, and they just clunk into each other. I should have used a different stand or pivoted them in some way or bent the wings or something so that they actually rank up, but I didn't, so I just kind of got to tilt them sideways or something like that when they actually have to go stand next to each other when they charge or get charged. Moving on in our special selections, here is a corpse cart. So when you look at corpse cart, you usually think, well, it's okay. And sure enough, that's what it is. if you had more magic in your army list, more necromancers, more infantry units to benefit from the buffs that it gives out, it might be a little bit better. It's okay. It's solid. I don't think it's not worth the points. It's actually not bad as a counterpunching unit, which is mostly what happened with it in the campaign. I'd get tied up in a battle, and this thing would come in and add a bunch of impact hits with a very small base width. It can just touch a corner and get all of its attacks. It wasn't, it didn't exactly win me the games a lot of times. It will die to combat res very easily. Otherwise, it's got, a decent amount of wounds. It's got a ward save. It does pretty well. It's bad on offense. Even though it has like a pile of random zombie attacks, don't expect it to cause a lot of wounds. It's not bad. Would I say it's necessary for a Vampire Counts army list? No, but it's not bad. Anyway, this is the Stygian ferry, and very early on I determined that I wanted like the ferry from Greek mythology that would transport the dead back to where they live. So Charon the boatman and that kind of thing. This isn't Charon. There's another one that lurks around. And I do have plans to make even bigger versions. Like Charon's boat will probably be one of those mortis engines. But in the meantime, I wanted a little ferry. And so this is a sky cutter from the High Elves. And then the base, these little mists that it goes and it travels on, that's from a Tzeentch burning chariot. So the little warpy things I just painted gray to hopefully look like cloudy mists. And then they're pulled by a bunch of zombies. And it's carrying a load of dead back to the netherworld. And here's my little Stygian ferryman, who is actually the guy from the Mortis engine, because I like the look of him better. He was holding a little stick, and I just extended the stick a little bit. I just added a little bit more stick under his cloak to make a pole so that he can navigate his ferry. So there's a lot of conversions, really, a fair amount, and it's kind of a pain to paint. There's a lot of little details on here. So lots of little rats and skulls and bodies. So it took a long time, but I really like the model. I'm very pleased with this. I think it gets the theme of the army across. I changed the center bit a little bit here. I added a little gargoyle from the old Mordheim architecture sprue. But anyway, so it's a fair amount of conversions, fair amount of work, but I like it. I like this little guy. So he's gonna, just because I put in the work, I'm gonna use this thing in most of my armies. Oh, and speaking of work, the Terrorgheist. So the Terrorgheist is filthy. Like, it's way too good. It maybe didn't dominate the games that I played it in. It did die. It doesn't like having swarms attack it in the flank, and it's not invulnerable or anything, but it is such a big problem. And it's absolutely a killer for other people's monsters. So we had some rounds where I brought a monster, my opponents brought monsters, and that Scream of the Terrorgheist just tears other monsters apart. So if you're thinking of putting a Terrorgheist in, yeah, especially at small point values, reconsider, maybe make a game of it, maybe don't do this. I brought it because there was a monster around and I wanted to keep it in theme. But maybe I should have thought about something else. It didn't ruin the campaign, but they are very, very good. They are also very, very difficult to paint. First off, they're gigantic. They're colossal models. And I glued it all together and painted it as one piece. I didn't paint it in assemblies. I've had problems with that before. When if you put a bunch of paint on something and try and assemble it, it can fit a little bit wonky. But anyway, the big thing is you don't realize all the details on this thing. Like, I tried counting up all the skulls that are scattered throughout this thing. So he's got some hanging from these little hairs on its neck. You've got ones on the base. And check out in here. You're never going to see this. There's his internal organs, then the skeletal system, and then you've even got, can you even see these? Probably not. There's a bunch of skulls and bones inside the stomach in there. So there's just layers and layers to this model. Very challenging to paint. Ugh. Yeah. Nice model. But man, these new Games Workshop things, they are a different thing unto themselves. I'm glad he's done, but what a beast. At least he's worth a lot of points. I would probably only use him in larger games. So, there you have it. The army performed very well. We came in second in the campaign, and that's really only because The last game was a multiplayer game, and the guys were just a little bit slow to react. I didn't play it maybe as aggressively as far as the victory conditions go as I should have, but I think I had the best win record for the normal games. I think I won more games than the rest of my opponents. So the army did real well, but it's not exactly like that makes me a strategic genius. The vampire counts are a strong army. They just are. They are high points values, they are low points values. And so that is my thoughts on modeling and painting these guys and how they perform on the table. Let me know if you have any questions, comments, concerns, that kind of thing, and I'll see you on the next one.